Hello everyone, it's great to see you back on the channel today. The love story between single mother Ly Hoai Ca and police officer Hung is heading into a new turning point. In the previous episode, we witnessed the moment when Hoai Ca almost let go, ready to leave Hung because of pressure from his mother. But with all his sincerity and patience in every word, Hung convinced her to stay. It seemed that from then on, they would walk hand in hand through days of peace. But storms never truly rest. Suddenly, Tony, the little boy Hoai Ca cherishes as her entire world, was struck by a persistent high fever, his body burning like embers. The fever refused to subside, forcing them to rush him to the hospital. There, an unexpected diagnosis was revealed. Tony was suffering from a rare and risky illness. Can this disease be treated? How will Hoai Ca and Hung face such a harsh trial? And will their love be strong enough to withstand the fear, the tears, and the sleepless nights that lie ahead? Join us in today's episode as we step into the next developments of the story, where love and hardship intertwine like a tense, high-stakes game of chess. Tony curled up on the small bed, his cheeks flushed red, beads of sweat rolling down his temples and soaking into the pillow. Each breath was like a faint, weary whisper, trembling with the rhythm of his fever. Hoai Ca sat close beside him, her hands never stopping as she replaced the cool towels on his forehead, her eyes tracking his every small movement. She had tried everything, from wiping his body with warm water, gently massaging his arms and legs, giving him fever medicine on schedule, to feeding him tiny spoonfuls of warm water, but the fever clung to him stubbornly, like a raging tide that receded only to come crashing back. Mrs. Ha stayed busy at her side, preparing basins of water, wringing out towels over and over, her voice a mix of soft comfort and quiet sighs. The women's eyes met several times in silence, and in that silence, the weight of their worry only deepened. Each time the fever dropped even slightly, they dared to hope, only to feel their hearts plunge again when it returned. When Hung stepped into the house, the sight stopped him in his tracks. The dim yellow light from the table lamp cast over Tony's pale face, his dry lips, and half-closed eyes heavy with exhaustion. Without hesitation, Hung strode forward and placed his hand on the boy's forehead. One touch was enough. There was no time to wait. Hospital. Now, he said, his voice firm but laced with tension. On the way, the steady hum of the engine contrasted sharply with the tangle of thoughts in each person's mind. Hoai Ca held Tony tightly to her chest, feeling every faint heartbeat against her. Each second stretched into an eternity, and all she wished for was to see the examination room doors open before her. At the pediatric ward, the doctor examined Tony carefully, his serious expression making the atmosphere even heavier. After a preliminary check, he informed them, Tony was showing signs of a rare chromosomal disorder. Not only was it uncommon, but it was also complex, requiring time to determine the exact cause. Blood samples and other tests were taken immediately, with the explanation that the results would be sent for further consultation and thorough analysis. The doctor prescribed fever reducers and pain relief, instructing Hoai Ca and Hung on how to care for him, and stressing the need to watch for any unusual symptoms. By the time they left the hospital, it was late. The streetlights glowed quietly along the empty road. They both knew the coming days would be a harsh trial, when every breath, every small movement of the boy would be bound to sleepless nights, restless dozing, and silent prayers. When the doctor mentioned the words, rare illness, Hoai Ca froze as if all the air had been sucked from the room. She tried to keep her composure to hear the rest of his instructions, but her heart pounded wildly, and her hands unconsciously clutched the hem of her shirt. In her mind, a torrent of questions surged. Why my child? Will he survive? Yet none had an answer. Hung stood beside her, his eyes darkening. He looked at Tony, who was dozing in his mother's arms, the boy's small face pale, his lips pressed together as if enduring something quietly. In that moment, Hung felt a sharp ache in his chest. The boy wasn't his biological son, but the love he had for Tony had long been that of a true father. More than anything, he couldn't bear seeing Hoai Ca in such pain. He wished he could take on every illness, every hardship, so she would never have to shed another tear. They left the hospital in silence. No words were exchanged, only the sound of their footsteps blending with the metallic clang of doors closing behind them. Outside, the night wind carried a chill that pressed against their faces, making the air even heavier. They stopped at a small roadside pharmacy, buying every medicine the doctor had prescribed, from fever reducers and pain relievers to nutritional supplements. The pharmacist glanced at Tony and let out a quiet sigh, tightening the knot in Hoai Ca's chest. Back home, Hung gently carried Tony into the room, adjusting the pillows so the boy could rest as comfortably as possible. Hoai Ca carefully prepared the medicine, measuring each pill and spoonful with precision. Tony obediently took his medicine, but his tired eyes only flickered toward his mother before closing again. The room was so still they could hear the ticking of the wall clock, each second stretching into an eternity. Outside, darkness blanketed the house. Inside, two people sat side by side, waiting for the test results as if awaiting a verdict that would decide their fate. They knew the road ahead would not be easy, but as long as Tony still had a glimmer of hope, they would hold on to each other and keep moving forward. When they arrived home, Tony was gently laid on his familiar bed, the blanket pulled up to his waist. Yet the heat radiating from his small body still burned like glowing embers. Hoai Ca sat by his side, mixing medicine while carefully wiping the sweat from his forehead. Just as the doctor had instructed, after taking the fever reducer, Tony's temperature slowly began to drop. Within half an hour, the flush on his face softened into a healthy pink, and his eyes opened, offering his mother a faint, weary smile. In that moment, it felt as if a heavy stone had been lifted from Hoai Ca's chest. But the relief didn't last long. Only a few hours later, when the medicine's effect wore off, the heat flared up again with force. Tony's small face scrunched in discomfort, his lips dry and parched, and a faint groan escaped into the still air. Hoai Ca immediately took his temperature. The mercury in the thermometer climbed so quickly that she could feel her heart thudding harder with every beat. Mrs. Ha sat close by the bed as well, her calloused hands constantly changing the cool towels, soothing him with quiet words and sighs. In her eyes, worry and helplessness seemed to blend into one. "If only I could take his illness for him," she murmured, her voice catching. Hoai Ca's chest burned as she watched her son. She longed for the test results to come instantly, to know what her child was truly facing, but the clock hands crawled forward, each minute dragging on. Outside, the night wind whispered through the trees, but inside the small room, the air was thick with the scent of medicine, sweat, and the restless tension of those keeping vigil. And so, the cycle continued through the night, fever rising, falling, then rising again. Each time Tony awoke after the fever broke, he still tried to give his mother a faint smile, as if to comfort her. Yet to Hoai Ca, that smile felt like a blade pressing into her heart, a painful reminder that her son was slowly losing his strength. Anyone who stopped by, upon seeing Tony, his frail body lying still beneath a thin blanket, could not suppress a sigh. Their eyes betrayed a deep pity, as if each wished they could bear his illness in his place, so he could run and play like other children. But fate, in its cruelty, had chosen Tony to endure it instead. Hung sat by the bed, his gaze fixed on Tony's every smallest movement. Each time the boy's face tightened from the fever, Hung would gently press a cool towel to his forehead, adjust the blanket and pillow, or shift his position so he could rest more comfortably. He spoke little, quietly tending to each task as if it were second nature, habits ingrained since the day he chose to step into the lives of Hoai Ca and Tony. To him, this boy was far more than the son of the woman he loved. Tony had become a vital part of his heart, a reason to hurry home after work, a source of strength to face every pressure outside. And now, seeing Tony so ill, Hung felt a helpless ache that stole his breath. Whenever Hoai Ca needed him, he was there, whether it was rushing out to buy medicine at midnight, preparing warm water to wipe Tony's body, or sitting through the night just to make sure the boy's breathing stayed steady. No matter how tired he was, he refused to leave the room, fearing that if he looked away for even a moment, he might miss something important. Under the soft glow of the yellow lamp, the shadows of 3 figures, a man, a woman, and a small boy, flickered on the wall. It was more than just the image of a family, it was a testament to their bond, to the quiet but unyielding love that held them together, even as fate continued to test them with every passing hour. The hospital said it would take 3 days for the final test results to be ready. On paper, it was just 3 days, but for Hoai Ca and Hung, it felt longer than an entire winter. During that time, Tony remained bedridden, his fever smoldering like a fire that refused to die out, flaring up now and then until the whole room felt stifling. By day, Hoai Ca stayed by her son's side, wiping his body, changing cool towels, checking his temperature, coaxing him to sip water. By night, Hung took over, watching over Tony's sleep. The slightest change in the boy's breathing would jolt him awake to check on him. Each time the thermometer climbed higher, their hearts would race, as if they were staring at a ticking time bomb with no idea when it might explode. But Hoai Ca's worry wasn't just about her son's health. There was another weight pressing down on her: money. She knew her finances all too well, raising a child alone, covering daily expenses, and managing sudden costs was already a struggle. Now, if Tony needed long-term treatment or an expensive surgery, she truly didn't know how she would cope. The thought felt like a cold hand tightening around her heart, forcing her to turn away at times to hide her tears. Hung saw it all. He didn't offer empty comfort. Instead, he quietly helped however he could, handling chores, buying medicine, preparing meals, even skipping his shifts to be at home and care for Tony. Whenever Hoai Ca sat silently by the bed, her eyes hollow with worry, he would simply place a gentle hand on her shoulder, a wordless reminder that she was not fighting alone. The 3 days of waiting crawled by, each hour stretching into a test of patience and hope. They both knew that, whatever the results would say, they had to be ready to face them, because Tony was the bond tying their hearts together, stronger than any fear. Mrs. Ha loved Tony as if he were her own flesh and blood. She often told the neighbors that from the day Hoai Ca stepped into the house, she had considered her like a daughter, and Tony, the grandchild to whom she wanted to give all her love. So when she saw the boy worn out, running a constant high fever, she simply couldn't sit still. Each time Tony's temperature spiked, she would hurry to prepare pots of herbal medicine, carefully selecting each plant from the garden before boiling them into water for bathing, steaming, and wiping him down. She believed these traditional remedies could help bring down the fever and drive away the sickness. After each bath, she would gently pat Tony's head, whispering to him as if soothing a toddler. But no matter how much she tried, the results barely improved. The fever clung to him like a shadow that refused to leave. Day by day, Tony's health declined. He began to eat less, turning away even from the dishes he once eagerly asked for. A steaming bowl of chicken porridge placed before him would only get a few spoonfuls before he shook his head. Sometimes, he would turn his face away, lips pressed tight, leaving Hoai Ca torn between tenderness and helplessness. On the nights spent waiting for the test results, the air in the house felt tense, as if an invisible cord were tightening around them. Every faint cough, every rustle of movement from Tony made everyone glance at each other in alarm. They all knew that such a small body, battling an illness with no clear cause, could hardly endure what an adult could. Sometimes Tony would wake in the middle of the night, crying, his sobs weak but drawn out, piercing Hoai Ca's heart like hundreds of tiny needles. She would hold him in her arms, rocking and rubbing his back, unaware that her tears were falling into his hair. Mrs. Ha would stand quietly in the corner, her eyes red, yet forcing her voice to remain steady to reassure her daughter-in-law. It'll be all right. It has to be all right. And yet, deep inside each of them, the fire of worry burned on, slowly consuming every hour and minute as they awaited word from the hospital, a word that would determine the shape of the days ahead for this little family. In the small room, the steady hum of the electric fan blended with Tony's faint, wheezy breaths. Hung sat by the bed, gently pressing a cool towel to the boy's forehead, occasionally glancing at Hoai Ca mixing medicine at the table in the corner. The air, already heavy from Tony's illness, felt even more oppressive under the silence between them. Suddenly, the phone in Hung's pocket began to vibrate. He frowned slightly, pulled it out, and when he saw his superior's number, his expression instantly turned serious. Stepping outside, he answered, listening intently, but within the first few sentences from the other end, his face froze. His superior's voice dropped, deliberate and grave. "We have new information about your mother." At the mention of her, memories of the day she came after Hoai Ca resurfaced, like an unhealed scar in Hung's mind. That day, he had reported the incident to his superior, leading the police to quietly surround Hoai Ca's neighborhood, ready to intervene should his mother return with harmful intent. After persistent surveillance, they had tracked her down. She was hiding in a secluded roadside motel on the outskirts of the city. The tactical team had drawn up a detailed plan to capture her. But unlike a standard arrest, this time the superior wanted to give her a chance. He hoped Hung would join the operation, not to subdue her, but to persuade her, to convince her to turn herself in before things reached the point of no return. "We understand your situation, Hung," his superior said, his voice firm yet tinged with empathy. "If there's even the slightest chance she'll come willingly, it should be you. Better that than ending it with her in handcuffs." Hung's grip on the phone tightened as a lump rose in his throat. He hadn't expected his superior to consider his feelings this way. Gratitude and heaviness warred inside him. On one side was his mother, a woman who had strayed too far. On the other were Hoai Ca and Tony, the people he was determined to protect. When he returned to the room, he stood watching Hoai Ca for a long moment. She was carefully spooning medicine into Tony's mouth, unaware of what had just transpired. Hung stepped forward, placed a hand on her shoulder, and said quietly, "I have to go back to the station now." His voice was steady, but his eyes revealed everything, that he was about to face the most difficult confrontation of his life. Before she could ask more, he grabbed his coat, leaned down to brush his hand through Tony's hair, and turned toward the door. His figure slowly disappeared down the alley, leaving behind a cold, uneasy emptiness in the room. The Special Operations briefing room was packed, fluorescent lights casting a cold glow over the large map spread across the long central table. Bright red dots and colored lines marked each checkpoint, approach route, and potential escape path. The air was thick with urgency, so much so that the rustle of turning pages seemed unnaturally loud. Every pair of eyes was locked on the map, analyzing it like a chessboard where a single wrong move could topple the entire strategy. The chief stood at the head of the table, arms folded, his gaze sweeping the room before speaking in a low, steady voice. "This isn't just about apprehending a suspect. We're dealing with a highly sensitive situation. Our primary goal is to subdue her and bring her back safely, while avoiding any unnecessary impact on nearby civilians. And most importantly, this is her final chance to turn back." He paused, looking directly at Hung. "Hung will be the first to make contact. You have an advantage no one else does. You're both a police officer and her son. If anyone can make her put down her weapon and cooperate, it's you." One of the tactical officers pointed to a yellow-marked section on the map, his voice firm. The perimeter will be locked down by 3 teams. Teams 1 and 2 will secure the front and side exits. Team 3 will be concealed in the tree plantation behind the motel to block any attempt at escape through the rear. Within a 200-meter radius, no one enters except the assigned units. He turned to Hung and added, "Inside, you'll go in with a small support team, keeping a safe distance to avoid putting pressure on her. If she cooperates, we move out quietly. If she resists or shows signs of being dangerous, the reaction team will close in immediately. The goal is 0 casualties." For a moment, the room was silent, broken only by the soft tapping of the chief's pen on the table. "Hung," the chief said more slowly, "we know this is a heavy burden for you. But it's also your last chance to pull your mother back before it's too late. We trust you know what needs to be done." Hearing this, a heat rose in Hung's chest. He clenched his fists, forcing down the storm of emotions churning inside. Never had a mission felt this difficult, because this time, the target wasn't a faceless criminal, but the woman who had given him life and raised him. He took a deep breath, then gave a small, firm nod, his voice hoarse but resolute. "Thank you, everyone. I'll do everything I can to make her come back, face the truth, and end this here." A few nearby teammates nodded in silent support, as if passing him their strength. Hung knew that if he failed, what lay ahead could turn into a tense manhunt, and then there would be no room for mercy. Deep down, he swore to himself that he must succeed, at any cost, because this wasn't just a police mission. This was his final chance to pull his mother back from the edge. The endless 3-day wait finally came to an end. That morning, the sky hung heavy and gray, clouds swollen as if ready to spill rain at any moment. From the early hours, Hoai Ca could barely sit still. Each tick of the wall clock echoed in her mind like a relentless reminder, the moment of truth was drawing near. When the phone rang, the hospital's voice on the other end confirming the results were ready, her heart clenched tight. Hung immediately offered to go with her, but Hoai Ca shook her head gently. She wanted to hold that envelope in her own hands, even as she silently prayed it would bring good news. The hospital corridor at midday was quiet, save for the faint echo of footsteps. When the nurse handed her the envelope, Hoai Ca's hands trembled so badly she had to grip its edge tightly to keep it from slipping. Her eyes fixed on the bold letters on the page inside, yet the words blurred, veiled by the rising film of tears. A heavy stillness surrounded her. Then, line by line, the diagnosis emerged, each word a cold blade cutting deep. Tony had a rare genetic disorder linked to chromosomal abnormalities, requiring long-term, complex treatment at a staggering cost. She stood frozen. The tears she had been holding back spilled freely, tracing down her cheeks before falling onto the cold paper. She clutched the results to her chest as though holding the pain itself, while a chorus of "why" rang in her mind without a single answer. Hung stood beside her, silent. He knew that at this moment, any words of comfort would be hollow. He simply stepped forward, resting a steady hand on her shoulder, letting her lean into him as her muffled sobs filled the still hallway. A sense of helplessness wrapped around them both. If the past days had been a drawn-out stretch of anxious waiting, this moment was the sudden arrival of the true storm, the one that would sweep them into an arduous journey whose end was nowhere in sight. So, what exactly will Tony's test results reveal? Will that rare chromosomal disorder still hold a glimmer of hope for treatment, or will it mark the start of a grueling journey with no clear end in sight? And elsewhere, the mission to apprehend Hung's mother is entering its most critical phase. Can Hung, in the role of both a son and a police officer, find the strength to persuade her to turn herself in, to salvage what little light remains in her life? Or will events take a different turn, forcing the law to intervene with decisive measures, only then allowing Hoai Ca and Tony a true chance at peace. All the answers still lie ahead. Stay tuned for the next chapter to see whether love, courage, and determination will be enough to change the course of their fate.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mình vừa hoàn thành video về nội dung của Ly Hoai Ca. Trong tập này thì câu chuyện nó đang trở nên diễn biến rất là sâu sắc. Vì như mọi người cũng đã biết là ở tập trước, Hoai Ca và Hùng đã đưa Tony là con trai của Hoai Ca đi khám bệnh. Tuy nhiên ở đây bác sĩ đã phát hiện ra là cậu bé đang mắc phải một căn bệnh lạ. Và sau khi cho thuốc về để hạ sốt và đợi kết quả xét nghiệm thì khi về nhà thì Tony đã trở nặng hơn và cậu bé sốt triền miên và sức khỏe càng ngày càng không ổn định. Điều này khiến cho Hoai Ca vô cùng lo lắng. Và hơn nữa, Hùng thì mẹ của anh cũng là người trước kia đã gần hại chết Hoai Ca đấy mọi người, thì hiện tại đang bị công an phát hiện là đang lẩn trốn ở trong một cái nhà nghỉ gần nơi mà nhà của Hoai Ca. Vậy thì liệu Tony có thể khỏi bệnh hay không và mẹ của Hùng có bị bắt hay không thì mời mọi người đón xem ở trong những tập tiếp theo nhé.